December 1st, guys, December is here. That means a month filled with holiday gatherings and holiday parties.
So having a wine with your dinner can lead to quite a headache the next day. So we're asking, why is that? Here now with Nine Health expert Dr. Payal Kohli. I did notice that, like if I have a beer or if I have a whiskey or something like that, it's not necessarily as bad. But usually if I have a glass of wine with dinner, sometimes I'll get a headache either right away or the next morning. Why?
Yeah, so you may be one of these people that's susceptible. So we've been trying to study this for really many, many years. There's lots of theories. So histamines, which is an allergic reaction because wine has a lot of histamines. So are you reacting in an allergic fashion? Sulfites, which is a preservative in wines, are you possibly reacting to that? Tannins, which is the grape skin, could there be something in that? Could it be the alcohol content, Steve? Could it be the speed of drinking? Could it be your hydration status? These are all sort of theories put out there, but there's been a fascinating new study that says it's actually probably something different.
And that is?
That is something.
So I always heard it was just sugar. It's because there's so much sugar, but maybe it's more complicated than that.
That's right. So it's called quercetin, which means it's not necessarily the wine, but it's how your body is metabolizing the wine. So this compound quercetin prevents the metabolism or breakdown of the wine, and that's what causes the headache. So if you've heard of the Asian flush, which is that certain races have an inability to metabolize alcohol as effectively. So they get red and flushed and they get headaches. That's called the Asian flush. That is a genetic version of this problem where you take in too much quercetin, your body doesn't metabolize the alcohol properly, and that's really what's causing those headaches.
Is there anything you can do to prevent the headache then?
Besides
just avoiding.
Okay, so that was going to be my number one.
Because people are
I mean,
the holidays, people are
holidays.
going to do it.
Right.
I'm
So-
not asking
so
for a
if you-
cheat sheet.
If you think about your wine is not being metabolized as quickly. So how can you trick your body into sort of keeping up with the metabolism of the wine? So one is to drink more slowly. So if you do drink slowly and space it out over several hours, that's really helpful. Drink alcohol that has less, alcohol content. So beer, for example, over wine might be a better choice because it has less alcohol in it. Hydrate up a storm because that improves the metabolism essentially of the wine. Switching from red to white can also help because it has less of that quercetin in it. So if you're not partial to one wine or the other, that may be another thing you can do. Lots of tricks. I often tell people if they go to a party and they're planning to drink 3 or 4 drinks a week, don't drink it all at the same party. Space it out over 3 or 4 days with your dinner. So better to drink one drink every night and indulge a little bit rather than go and kind of go crazy on the weekends.
I feel like I'm uniquely qualified for this conversation. Love me some red wine. But I've also heard, too close to bedtime is a problem too, and how you're digesting overnight. So yes, hydrate, yes, limit, but also like time of day probably too.
Very, very important. Time of day and then putting food in there.
Yeah.
Because again, that changes the way that your body absorbs that alcohol. And oftentimes, especially women, because they're smaller in body size, they can be much more sensitive to that same alcohol content than men can. And the other thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you really, really drink it very slowly and you take your time sort of savoring the flavor.
That's how we're supposed to drink wine.
Yeah, you let it breathe, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what, yeah.
Sip it just so.
Exactly right. And then people ask, well, how do you know if it's a headache from the alcohol? Like you wake up with a hangover or you actually do have a true red wine headache. And that's where the timing really kicks in. So you want to note when your headache starts. If it's like 30 minutes to 3 hours after you drink, it's the wine. It's the quercetin, possibly. But if it's the
wondering.
next day or several hours later, it's probably the alcohol.
Because sometimes that'll kick in for me like almost right after.
Maybe you got it.
I might be it.
Yeah.
Well, and folks say too, the red wine hangover, if it is the alcohol, it's one of the worst.
It can be
We don't
really
want to be hungover and sick this holiday. Come on. I feel like you're always encouraging us to make good decisions.
Well, and then I like to detox the next day. So let's say you did have a party, you drank a little too much, you woke up with a headache. The best way to sort of detox is to pull those electrolytes in there. So coconut water, bananas, avocados, a nice fruity breakfast. That's a really good way to put potassium in some of those electrolytes because alcohol is a diuretic. It makes us urinate more. So we've lost a lot of those electrolytes as our body processes that alcohol.
So it's not to go and get like a burger the next morning. That's not how you handle this. The grease coat, you don't do
Remember
that.
who you're asking.
Yeah, that's true.
And
That might be the other advice, but not the medical advice.
And don't do too much of the ibuprofen and Motrin, because
Yeah,
that's what people reach for as well. And alcohol already causes irritation of the lining of the stomach. And I'm also not a fan of those IV infusion bars. So those hangover helper infusions, be careful with those. Just the natural way by mouth is really the best way to flush that out.
Dr. Kohli, thank you. Good advice. We appreciate it.